Beneath the Surface. Chapter 1. Sarah woke with a start, her arm instinctively reaching out to the other side of the bed. It was cold and empty. Her fingers fumbled for the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. Mike's side of the bed was undisturbed. Sarah glanced at the clock, 3:23 a.m. Where was he? She climbed out of bed, her feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. "Mike," she called out as she walked down the stairs. No answer. The house was eerily quiet. She checked the front door, still locked. His car was in the driveway. Where could he have gone in the middle of the night without his car? A feeling of unease washed over Sarah as she searched every room. Finally, she stood in his study, scanning his desk. Everything seemed in order. Case files stacked neatly, laptop closed, desk calendar open to this week with nothing unusual marked. Except, Sarah reached for the calendar, examining it closer. Yesterday's date had a corner folded down. Mike never marked his calendar. She turned to the previous month. Another date was folded too. Why would he flag random dates like that? She sank into his desk chair, her mind racing through the implications. The folded pages meant something. But what? Her eyes landed on the desk drawer. It was unlocked. Mike always kept it locked. Hands trembling, Sarah slid open the drawer. Inside lay a burner phone and a packed duffel bag. Shock gripped her and squeezed the air from her lungs. What was going on? Chapter 2. Sarah barely slept, her mind replaying the previous night's discoveries. As soon as daylight broke, she called Mike's office. His secretary said he hadn't arrived yet and she couldn't reach him either. Sarah's next call was to the police to report Mike missing. The officers who came to the house were polite but dismissive. They asked the usual questions. Did Mike have a history of disappearing, marital problems, drug abuse? Sarah answered no, becoming increasingly frustrated. After checking his car and writing down a description, they said there was nothing more they could do yet. If Mike didn't reappear in 48 hours, they could open an investigation. As soon as the officers left, Sarah searched the house again. This time she pulled out drawers, ruffled through closets, scoped under beds. She had to find something that explained the burner phone and packed bag. Finally, tucked in the back corner of Mike's closet, Sarah uncovered a box. Inside were titles and registration papers for a truck in Mike's name, a second license in another name, travel documents for Mexico, and thousands of dollars in cash. Sarah's mind was spinning. She sank onto the bed, clutching the documents. Who was this man she thought she knew? Her Mike ran a small law firm in town, loved puttering in their garden on weekends, and coached Little League baseball. This man had alternate identities and enough cash to flee the country. She had to learn the truth. Sarah steeled herself and began methodically calling every number listed in Mike's real phone. After hours of dead ends, she located one of the dates Mike had flagged. It matched a client payment in the law firm's records. For the first time, Sarah felt the creaking open of a doorway into her husband's hidden life. Chapter 3. The address was for a rundown apartment building on the edge of town. The front entrance hung open, half off its hinges. Sarah hesitated, then walked inside and climbed the dingy stairs to apartment 2E. She knocked sharply. The door swung open a few inches, stopped by a chain. Bloodshot eyes peered out at Sarah through the gap. "Yeah," the man rasped. I'm sorry to bother you," Sarah stammered. "I'm looking for someone. He may have been here recently." She held up a photo of Mike. The man squinted at it. Maybe you don't remember what's in it for me. Sarah's hesitation must have shown. The man smirked. Couple hundred refresh my memory. The cash was tucked in Sarah's purse. She swallowed hard and passed it through the door. The man glanced at it and nodded, sliding the chain free. The apartment was in shambles, ripped furniture, empty bottles everywhere. He gestured for Sarah to sit, but she remained standing. Mike, he was here all right couple weeks back. Said he was looking to pick up extra work off the books cash deal. Sarah's hands were trembling, but she tried to keep her voice steady. What kind of work? The man grinned, revealing rotted teeth. Let's just say the kind you don't talk about, but your boy seemed real interested. Sarah felt bile rising in her throat. Drugs? Some other criminal activity? Before she could ask more, the man said, Now I think that's all I remember for today. He crossed his arms, waiting. Sarah threw 2 more bills at him and fled the apartment, his gravelly laugh echoing down the stairs. She sat in her car, sobbing into the steering wheel until long after the sun had set. Chapter 4. Over the next 2 days, Sarah methodically tracked down the other flagged date in Mike's calendar. It matched a big deposit into his firm's trust account several months back. After hours on the phone with the bank manager, she learned the funds came via wire transfers from shell companies out of Mexico. Sarah's next stop was the police station, where she sat across the desk from a Detective Morris. She explained everything she had uncovered: the burner phone, money, apartment meeting, shell transfers. The detective listened, taking occasional notes, but remaining stone-faced. Ma'am, this is all very concerning if true, but it's largely circumstantial at this point, he finally said, folding his notebook closed. My husband is missing. Sarah cried. Doesn't this warrant some kind of investigation? We investigate missing persons, not hunches about what someone may have been involved in, the detective replied calmly. I can put out another bulletin with local departments to be on the lookout for your husband, but unless we get evidence of a crime associated with his disappearance, our hands are tied. Sarah left the station furious, with Morris' excuses still ringing in her ears. Fine, she would keep investigating herself. On the long drive home, an idea began to form. The investigator she sometimes contracted for legal cases, maybe he could help track Mike's activities without the limitations of the police. She felt the first glimmer of hope in days as she pulled into her driveway. Chapter 5. Carl, it's Sarah. Yes, it has been a while, she said into the phone, hoping her old investigator still took on side jobs. To her relief, he was willing to make discreet inquiries for her. Sarah scanned Mike's law firm records for likely contacts while waiting to hear back from Carl. 2 days later, her phone rang. Carl had learned the Mexican shell companies paid Mike under the table to broker import deals. Customs paperwork he swiped showed car parts and electronics coming through supposedly, but the quantities didn't add up. Sounds like he was dirty, Sarah helping bring drugs over the border tucked in those shipments, Carl said. And it may have caught up with him. Rumor is one went bad between some mean players down south and their buyers up here. Could be why your husband is scarce. Sarah ended the call feeling like she might throw up. Drugs. Money laundering. Her Mike. It couldn't be real. But clearly there was another side to him, leading a dangerous second life. Carl offered to keep following leads, see if he could pick up a trail, but Sarah hesitated. She had already thrown so much money away and put herself at risk. And if Carl was right, whoever Mike had pissed off were not people to be trifled with. Sarah decided her best bet was to try picking up the money trail herself. It always left traces if you dug deep enough. She turned her focus to the law firm's records, working late each night to uncover anything suspicious. Days passed in a blur of dead ends, but finally she uncovered a repeat cash withdrawal pattern tied to a little lakeside cabin owned by the firm. Tomorrow she would make the 2-hour drive there. Maybe finally she would find Mike. Chapter 6. The cabin sat nestled among tall pines, overlooking a glassy lake. Sarah approached cautiously in case Mike was here. His car was not in the small gravel lot, but something about the crooked blinds in the window made her pause. Heart pounding, Sarah circled to the back of the cabin. The back door hung partially open. Sarah nudged it further and stepped inside. The small kitchen was dark, dishes piled up. "Mike," she called tentatively. No answer. Moving slowly, peering into shadows, Sarah cleared the first floor. Empty. She climbed the creaking stairs to the bedroom. Clothes were strewn around, bed rumpled. Someone had definitely been here recently. Back downstairs, her eyes snagged on Mike's baseball cap hanging on a peg. He must still be around. Sarah hurried outside to check the shed and boathouse. Just as her hopes were sinking, the roar of an engine broke the silence. She whirled around to see a boat rounding the tip of the lake toward the cabin's dock. Even at a distance, she recognized Mike's broad frame at the wheel. Sarah sprinted for the dock as the boat bumped alongside. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Mike cried as he cut the engine and leapt ashore. His eyes were wild, clothing disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Before Sarah could respond, Mike gripped her shoulders. "You shouldn't have come. It's not safe for you here." Sarah's joy at seeing him flickered into anger. "I've been worried sick, wanted posters all over town, and you're here hiding out." Mike ran a hand over his stubbled jaw, looking torn. "It's complicated, Sarah. I got caught up in some bad stuff, really bad." His eyes held a fear that shook her. Chapter 7. They sat on the dock, Mike clutching Sarah's hands as he explained how it began. A client had mentioned easy money bringing in imported goods. Just look the other way on paperwork, route payments offshore, leased transport space. It started slowly but soon ballooned. Mike couldn't exit without risk, so he kept facilitating bigger deals, swallowing his doubts. "It was so stupid," Mike said, dropping his head. "I knew it was all going south, but the money just kept coming in. I guess I convinced myself it wasn't hurting anyone." Sarah sat in stunned silence. This had gone far beyond what she imagined. "So what happened?" she finally asked. "Why take off all of a sudden?" Mike lifted his head. "Last shipment never arrived, millions lost. The buyers think I crossed them somehow. They're out for blood and have people across the border looking." He gripped her hands tighter. "I had to run, to protect you, Sarah. I could never live with myself if you got hurt because of my mess." His eyes were pleading for understanding. Sarah's mind swirled with shock and questions. Before she could ask more, Mike tensed, his head swiveling toward the tree line. "Get down," he hissed, pulling her off the dock and behind a boat. Peering around the hull, Sarah spotted 2 men emerging from the trees, guns in hand. Mike put a finger to his lips and motioned for her to stay hidden while he crept around the side of the cabin. Chapter 8. Sarah huddled behind the boat, heart slamming against her ribs. She strained to pick up the voices drifting from the front of the cabin. Mike was stalling them, insisting no one else was here. Sarah cast her eyes around for any possible weapon or escape. A shotgun hung inside the cabin's open back door. Keeping low, Sarah slid around the boat and slipped through the door. Just as her hand closed on the shotgun barrel, angry shouts exploded outside. Sarah froze. Through the window, she watched the armed men shove Mike to his knees on the gravel driveway. One man pressed a gun to the back of Mike's head, while the other stormed toward the cabin. Sarah raised the shotgun barrel as the man flung open the front door. Before he could react, Sarah pulled the trigger. The blast hit his shoulder, and he staggered back with a howl. Sarah pumped the shotgun and fired again, making him dive for cover. She sprinted for the back door, then into the woods, weaving between trees. Behind her, angry shouts and gunshots echoed. Sarah didn't stop running until she collapsed against a tree, lungs burning. She choked back sobs, imagining Mike captured or worse. What now? She couldn't go to the police, not with Mike's full crimes revealed. Feeling helpless, she huddled there as daylight faded. Finally, she crept back to the cabin. The front hung open, splintered from shotgun blasts. No sign of Mike or the other men. Dark stains marveled the driveway, but no, Sarah forced herself not to think about it. Instead, she scoured for any clue where they might have taken Mike. As dusk deepened, she finally noticed fresh tire tracks cutting through the back lot into the woods. Lifting her chin, Sarah steeled her nerves and followed into the dark forest. Chapter 9. The winding tire tracks carried Sarah deep into the shadowy pines surrounding the lake. She walked all night, pausing occasionally to listen for any sign of the men. As the blackness gradually lightened to gray, she came upon a small hunting cabin tucked in a glen. A dark sedan was parked out front. Sarah crouched in the brush studying the quiet cabin. After debating her options and seeing no better plan, Sarah approached and knocked sharply. A moment later, the cabin door creaked open, and a man filled the doorway. Sarah recognized him from the lake house. Bright white bandages covered his shoulder, but the sawed-off shotgun was still clutched in his good hand. "You got a lot of nerve showing up here," he growled. Sarah stood tall and looked him in the eye. "I want to see my husband." The man barked a harsh laugh. "Not sure there's much left to see." At Sarah's stricken expression, he laughed again. "Now he ain't dead yet anyway, but the boss sure worked him over good." He leered at Sarah. "Maybe you can convince the boss to go easy on him, if you make it worth his while." Before Sarah could respond, he grabbed her shoulder and shoved her stumbling into the dim cabin. Mike lay slumped in the corner, face swollen and shirt bloody. But at the sight of her, he stirred and cried, "Sarah, no." Chapter 10. Mike struggled against the zip ties binding his wrists and ankles. "Why did you come here, Sarah?" he groaned. Blood trickled from his hairline down his cheek. Their captor flicked his cigarette away and dragged Sarah deeper into the cabin. "The boss is sleeping, but I bet he'll wake up real nice for you, sweetheart." As he reached for her, Sarah twisted and drove her elbow into his wound. With a bellow of pain, he stumbled back and she sprinted for the door. She made it outside, but strong hands grabbed her shoulders and slammed her to the ground. Dazed, she looked up at a different man, cold anger etched on his face. "Get off our land or the next bullet won't miss," he growled down at her. Sarah went limp, letting him haul her up and shove her stumbling into the cabin again. She huddled by Mike, who struggled to sit up. "Sarah, listen. At nightfall I want you to run," he whispered urgently. "Follow the gully east, it'll take you to the road." Sarah vehemently shook her head. No, I won't leave you. She turned to their captors. Please, let us both go. I can bring you money, anything you want. The new man crossed his arms, face impassive. The other man rested a proprietary hand on Sarah's shoulder that made her skin crawl. Mike owes us and he's gonna pay, one way or another. But maybe you can buy us some time, the injured man leered. Chapter 11. All day the man watched Sarah and Mike from the corner as they whispered urgently. Mike begged Sarah again to escape at nightfall and find help, but she refused to consider leaving him. As dusk fell, their captor, with the bandaged shoulder, leered and grabbed Sarah's arm. Time to pay up, he snarled. Sarah wrenched away, and the man backhanded her. Mike erupted from the floor, but the other man pinned him down with a boot on his back. Wait, Mike choked out. I'll get you cash, drugs, whatever you want. He held the cold gaze of the man standing over him. Just, please, let her go. The bandaged man grinned wickedly. Well, you'll get us all that and more, but first, I'm gonna have a taste of your pretty wife. He dragged Sarah toward the back room as she kicked and fought. Mike roared desperately. Just as the man pulled Sarah out of view, a deafening barrage of gunfire erupted outside. The man froze, glancing uncertainly toward the door. Sarah seized her chance and smashed her elbow into his wounded shoulder. With a howl of pain, he crumpled to his knees. More gunshots outside. Police, come out with your hands up, a voice boomed through the door. Sarah whirled to see their other captor already diving out a side window. She rushed to Mike, quickly sawing through his binds with a knife snatched from the counter. Let's go, Mike cried, pulling her toward the side door. They emerged into moonlit woods and sprinted away hand in hand as police swarmed the cabin. Chapter 12. Mike pulled Sarah behind a wide tree trunk and peered back at the cabin now surrounded by police cars. How did they find us? Sarah whispered. No idea, but we can't let them catch us, Mike said grimly. I'd be looking at Major Time for the stuff I pulled. He turned to Sarah, eyes pleading. We need to disappear, at least for a while. Let things die down. Sarah hesitated, thinking of the life back home she'd have to abandon. But Mike was right. They were fugitives now. She nodded. Let's get to my truck. It's hidden a mile west, Mike said, taking her hand. They stole through moonlit forest, evading the police search parties. At last, Mike pointed out a battered pickup concealed under camo netting. It started on the first crank, and they bumped down rutted logging roads until finally hitting pavement. As the truck sped into the night, Sarah gazed out the window. Adrenaline was fading, weariness setting in. And lurking underneath, doubt. Could she really live life on the run with the near stranger Mike had become? She studied his tense jaw and white-knuckled grip on the wheel. Who was this man? Could she ever again trust him with her heart? Mike reached over and took her hand. We're in this together now, Sarah. I promise I'll keep you safe. Sarah squeezed his hand lightly. She had so many questions about the man Mike had become. But for now, she was simply grateful they had each other. Finally, she slept. Chapter 13. Sarah woke to sunlight filling the truck cab. Mike handed her a coffee and sandwich from a gas station. As she ate, Sarah studied the morning commuters around them. Ordinary people starting ordinary days, with no idea she and Mike were fugitives running from their former lives. Where are we going? Sarah finally asked quietly. Mike's jaw tensed. I still have contacts from my old business. There's a cabin down south they don't know about. We'll lay low there while figuring out our next move. Sarah shifted uneasily but stayed silent as mile after mile of highway unfurled beside them. The simple joy of being free from captivity was already complicated by doubts. Could she handle life on the run, constantly looking over her shoulder? Did she even know the man beside her? As night fell, Mike pulled onto a dirt road winding through dense forest. The cabin sat nestled among shadowy pines, isolated and overgrown. Inside was musty but tidy, with a stocked pantry and generator. As Sarah helped Mike barricade the doors and windows, she felt them both slip back into survival mode. That night, Sarah lay listening to the unfamiliar forest sounds. Mike's slow breathing came from the floor by the bed, giving her space. She shivered, missing his warmth. Could this work? Could she embrace life with him, leaving their past behind? Sarah didn't know, but they had to try. Slowly she drifted to sleep. Chapter 14. The next morning, Sarah stepped onto the creaking porch with 2 mugs of instant coffee. Mike sat in a rickety chair, rifle across his knees as he scanned the tree line. His posture betrayed exhaustion, but he gave her a small smile as she handed him the coffee. They sipped in silence until Mike spoke. I know you're wondering how I could get mixed up in all this. He stared down at his mug. I guess I convinced myself it didn't hurt no one. Just made paperwork look right. He shook his head bitterly. It became a game I couldn't quit, but what I dragged you into. His voice cracked. I'll regret that forever. He looked up, eyes pleading. I know it's asking a lot to stay, but I swear I'll do right by you, Sarah. No more lies or illegal stuff. Sarah studied his anguished face and saw hints of the caring husband she once knew. She squeezed his hand. We both made mistakes. All we can do is move forward together, wherever that leads. Later that day, Mike showed Sarah how to load and handle the rifle. That night, she helped him reset the perimeter alarms. Exhausted, Sarah fell asleep wondering what the new day would bring. Each morning now started with coffee on the porch together. The first few weeks, they rarely went beyond the clearing surrounding the cabin. But soon restlessness set in. One sunny morning, Mike proposed a hike to a nearby lake. Sarah leapt at the chance to roam under open sky. Their steps felt lighter as they left the cabin in the dust. Chapter 15. As Sarah and Mike hiked through dappled sunlight towards the shimmering lake, Sarah felt some of the weight on her shoulders lifting. Out here in nature, the dangers and uncertainties of their new life seemed held at bay. At the lake, Mike skipped stones across the mirror surface. Sarah waded in the shallows, laughing as minnows nibbled her toes. Mike grabbed her hand, and they splashed deeper, the cool water refreshing on the hot day. Later, laying on the rocky beach letting the sun dry their clothes, Sarah turned to Mike. Do you think we could have moments like this if we stayed on the run? Mike propped himself on one elbow. I hope so. I know you're feeling cooped up, but going back, I'd be looking at major time. His jaw tightened. Not sure our marriage could survive that. Sarah squeezed his hand. It survived a lot already, but you're right, we can't return yet. She smiled softly. For now, let's just focus on each new day together. Mike returned her smile. Deal. He pulled her closer and kissed her tenderly. As the sun dipped lower, casting the lake in golden light, Sarah let go of her doubts. This man had made mistakes, but his love was real. They would take each moment as it came. Hand in hand, they returned to the cabin. Mike fired up the grill on the porch, and they ate the fresh fish he had caught, laughing over memories from better days. If this was to be their life now, Sarah thought, maybe it was enough. Chapter 16. Over the next weeks, Sarah and Mike settled into a quiet rhythm. Mornings lingering over coffee, afternoons spent fishing or foraging in the woods, evenings grilling on the porch watching the sunset. But Sarah noticed Mike growing antsy as the days passed. He started disappearing for long stretches, returning evasive about where he had gone. One day, Sarah followed his boots tramping west and discovered a dirt bike hidden in the brush. Another time, she noticed fresh scratches on the truck's undercarriage. One night, Sarah awoke alone. After searching the cabin, she wrapped herself in a blanket on the porch steps to wait. As dawn broke, an approaching engine roar broke the stillness. Mike's shadowed face was guarded as he walked up. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered as he brushed past her inside. Sarah followed. "Is everything all right, Mike? You seem different lately." Mike rubbed his jaw, avoiding her eyes. Finally, he collapsed onto the sofa with a long breath. "I hate feeling trapped here, but there's risks to going out too much locally." He looked at her pleadingly. "Be patient with me, Sarah. I just need to feel useful again." Sarah sat beside him and took his hand. "Then let's find a way together." Mike nodded slowly. "You're right. We're partners in this new life. No more secrets." He drew her close. Sarah rested her head on his chest, hoping he meant it. Chapter 17. The next night, Sarah again woke to Mike gone and the truck missing. By midday, she was pacing the porch, imagination swirling. Finally, the truck rumbled down the dirt lane. Mike waved casually, but his smile froze at Sarah's stern face. "We need to talk, Mike. No more lies, remember?" She motioned him inside. With a sigh, Mike sank onto the sofa and began haltingly explaining. He still had connections across the border from his smuggling days. Last night he retrieved some documents one contact owed him, fake IDs and passports stashed there long ago. "I was going to surprise you with options for getting away, starting new lives," he said earnestly. "I want us to be free, Sarah." Sarah's pulse quickened at the thought of such escape, but she hesitated. "Won't your contacts report you if we use those IDs to cross the border?" "It's risky, I know," Mike admitted. "But so is staying here much longer. I think I can trust this man." Sarah wrung her hands, thinking. "Give me the night to consider it." Mike agreed reluctantly. After he went to bed, Sarah sat weighing their options in the lonely night. A new life together somewhere far away beckoned, if they could only reach it. By morning, Sarah had made her decision. It was time to leave. Mike's embrace felt tight with gratitude and relief. They selected new names and weddings bands, then Mike cut and dyed Sarah's hair. As she studied her altered reflection, Sarah silently bid goodbye to the old her. A new journey was beginning. Chapter 18. Sarah took a bracing breath as they approached the shadowy warehouse. Mike had set a meet here to purchase fake passports so they could flee the country. But every nerve tingled with doubt over trusting his criminal contacts. Sensing her tension, Mike squeezed her hand reassuringly. Inside, two men with hard eyes waited. Mike handed over an envelope of cash in exchange for 2 passports. As one man rifled through counting, the other's gaze raked over Sarah. She shuddered, but kept silent. "Pleasure doing business," Mike said tightly and turned for the door. They were steps from the exit when a shout rang out. "Hold up!" Sarah froze. The men flanked them, one grabbing the passport envelope from Mike's fist. "These better not be fakes, or you'll regret it," he snarled. Heart in her throat, Sarah waited breathlessly as he inspected the documents. After an agonizing minute, he nodded and handed them back. "Check out clean, guess you got smart going into retirement," he sneered at Mike. To Sarah's immense relief, they stepped aside to let them pass. In the truck, Sarah finally exhaled. Mike slammed his fist on the wheel. "Sorry about that. I had to be sure we weren't being set up." He pulled her close. "But we did it, Sarah. Tomorrow we'll be free." Sarah clung to him, wanting badly to believe it was true. Everything now hinged on making it through the border checkpoint. Sarah could hardly sleep that night, Patterson possibilities swirling. "Please," she prayed, "let us make it through." Chapter 19. Sarah gripped Mike's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened as they inched through the border crossing. He gave her a reassuring squeeze back. "Almost there," he murmured. "Just stay cool." At last they pulled up to the checkpoint. Mike handed over their shiny new passports as the agent studied them through the open window. Sarah tried to breathe evenly. After a silent minute, the agent handed back the passports with a curt nod and waved them through. Sarah finally exhaled as Mexico stretched out ahead. "See, smooth as can be," Mike said, flashing a grin. But he still drove well over the speed limit until the crossing was miles behind them. Only then did Sarah feel her body finally uncoil. They had made it. She gazed at the lush jungle scenery rolling past, allowing herself to imagine a new quiet life here. Maybe near the ocean, with a little bar Mike could run. Her daydream was shattered by the wail of a siren behind them. Mike's eyes flashed in the rearview mirror at the approaching patrol car, its lights blazing. "Damn it, just stay cool," he muttered, pulling over. A uniformed officer approached, hand on his holster. Mike rolled down the window. "Is there a problem, officer?" The cop studied their passports, then the truck's registration. With a sinking feeling, Sarah realized the plates were American. This could unravel everything. Chapter 20. The officers circled their truck slowly, then returned to Mike's window. "American plates on a Mexican-registered vehicle. Can you explain that, Senator?" Mike laughed easily. "Just purchased this beauty down here. Haven't gotten around to transferring the paperwork yet." The officer studied him coolly. "Your paperwork seems in order, but the truck will need Mexican plates to avoid further misunderstandings. There is a registration office 30 kilometers ahead." He stepped back and waved them on. Mike nodded politely and pulled away slowly. "See, no worries," he said brightly to Sarah. But his knuckles were white on the wheel. At the registration office, Sarah paced outside while Mike went in. After nearly an hour, he emerged scowling and slammed his fist on the hood. Trucks flagged as stolen in America. Someone must have reported it. He dragged both hands down his face. "We have no choice. We need to ditch the truck and get off the grid, fast." Sarah wavered, panic rising as their plan crumbled. Sensing her fear, Mike grasped her hands firmly. "Stick with me, Sarah. We just need to get deep enough they won't detect us. Then we can make a quiet life." His eyes implored her to keep faith. With a shaky breath, Sarah squeezed his hands back. "Okay, let's go." They hastily transferred their minimal belongings to a beat-up sedan Mike purchased from a roadside seller. Sarah silently prayed as they sped away once more into uncertainty. Chapter 21. Sarah lost track of the days as they zigzagged across Mexico, doubling back and switching cars frequently, always racing away from real or imagined pursuers. Each time they seemed to find temporary refuge, sinister new threats would send them fleeing into the night again. Sarah felt her spirit being slowly crushed under the unending stress. Part of her wondered if Mike was manufacturing new paranoid dangers to prolong their fugitive life. She began having fantasies of sneaking away and making it back across the border alone. But each time Mike sensed her withdrawal, he became attentive again, bringing her food and small gifts from the villages they passed through, telling her stories from his youth, as though trying to fill in the gaps between the man she married and who he had become. He was trying, Sarah believed, in the only way he now knew how. But it was always one step forward, 2 steps back. Finally, after weeks of living like refugees, they came upon a tiny beachside villa miles from anywhere. It was available immediately with no questions asked. To Sarah, it looked like paradise. "Please, Mike, can we stop running and make a home?" she pleaded. He hesitated, then caressed her cheek with a smile. "Okay, Sarah, no more running." They paid cash and the landlord handed over the key. It was run down but peaceful, with the sound of waves right outside. That night, curled in Mike's arms, Sarah fell into her first deep sleep in ages. Chapter 22. Sarah rose as the first rays of sun slipped through the shutters. Mike was already up, pacing the beach with a cell phone to his ear. His expression was tight as he clicked off the call and stared out at the endless horizon. Sarah poured 2 mugs of coffee and joined him on the sand. "Everything okay?" Mike's mouth twisted wryly. "Just demons I can't seem to escape." He turned to her. "Sarah, do you think people can ever really change? Leave the past completely behind?" She considered the weathered man before her. "I think if we try hard enough, we can build a new life from whatever we've got left, but only if we do it together." Tentatively, she reached out and took Mike's hand. His eyes searched hers, then he pulled her into an embrace. "You're right," he whispered into her hair. "This is our chance." They began constructing a new life in that forgotten seaside town. Mike took odd jobs. Sarah taught English. They went to the market each day hand in hand, greeting neighbors. At night, they sat outside listening to the waves. A month later, a familiar engine sound broke the quiet. Mike tensed, peering into the darkness beyond the cheerful lights of the villa. He turned to Sarah with fire in his eyes. "Time for a showdown." He strode toward the shadows, Sarah racing behind. A car door opened, and a figure stepped into the moonlight. Sarah gasped in shock and joy. This final encounter wasn't a threat at all, but a chance for redemption. Their new life could finally begin. The end.